Nvidia just lost $250 billion in a single trading session. Not because of a bad earnings report, not a scandal, not a recall, nothing like that. It happened because of one Reuters story about a machine most people have never heard of, built by a company almost nobody had heard of a week ago. By the time the market closed that day, ASML, the Dutch company that has quietly controlled one of the most important choke points in global technology for almost 2 decades, had lost roughly 55 billion euros in value. Its stock fell more than 8%, dropping to around $1,659, its lowest point since early June. Samsung and SK Hynix, the 2 biggest memory chip makers on the planet, each fell more than 13%. SanDisk dropped close to 11%. South Korea's benchmark index, the Kospi, plunged nearly 11% at one point and actually triggered an automatic trading halt to stop the panic from spiraling. AMD dropped more than 8%. Micron fell close to 6%. This wasn't a bad day for one company. This was the entire global chip industry flinching at once. So what actually caused this? A machine. China just started producing, in small numbers, one of the most important pieces of industrial equipment on Earth. The kind of machine that until very recently only one company on the planet could reliably build. Here's what most people get wrong first. Everyone assumes China was completely banned from buying these machines. That's not true. China bought a huge volume of ASML's equipment for years, at times making up close to 29% of ASML's total sales, worth around $9.5 billion in 2025 alone. What actually got restricted was the top tier. Now here's the part that actually moved markets. Reuters reported that a state-backed company out of Shanghai has begun mass production of its own immersion deep ultraviolet lithography systems, with first deliveries expected before the end of the year. The company is called Shanghai Yulongsheng Technology, founded back in 2022, built on roughly 1 billion yuan in registered capital. It barely has a public footprint. No website worth mentioning, no press office, nothing you can Google in 5 minutes, which tells you this was never meant to be a startup story, it was built quietly on purpose. Behind it sits Shanghai Electric and a subsidiary of Shanghai International Trust, and the engineering talent was pulled directly from Shanghai Microelectronics Equipment, China's long-running lithography effort, plus a team connected to CXMT, the equipment maker tied to Huawei. This is not a garage operation. This is a national resource merger wearing a startup costume. The plan on the table is roughly 5 machines in 2026, scaling toward about 20 machines in 2027. And the first customers are already lined up. SMIC, China's largest chip foundry, Hua Hong Semiconductor, and CXMT, the country's leading memory maker, which reportedly just locked in a 5-year supply deal worth more than $7 billion with ByteDance as demand for AI memory explodes. So this isn't theoretical. There are real customers waiting with real money on the table. 5 machines is not a threat to ASML's business. ASML shipped somewhere around 130 immersion DUV systems in 2025 alone, on top of everything else in its lineup, and pulled in tens of billions in revenue doing it. It's also planning to grow its own DUV production capacity by 30% by 2027. So in pure output terms, 5 Chinese machines next to ASML's annual shipments is not even close to a fair fight yet. So why did the market panic like this was the end of the world? Because markets don't just price what's happening this year, they price what happens next. For almost 2 decades, ASML's monopoly was treated like an unbreakable wall, the kind of advantage that justified premium valuations across an entire industry. What does 5 machines look like when it becomes 50 in 3 years? Or 500 in 6? That's not a 5-machine story anymore. That's a trajectory story. And trajectories are exactly what move $500 billion valuations in a single trading session. So here's where this actually leaves us. This is not China defeating ASML this year, and anyone telling you that is skipping the real numbers. But it is very real proof that the wall everyone assumed was permanent now has a crack in it. And that crack was reportedly enough to wipe out $250 billion from Nvidia and tens of billions from ASML in a matter of hours. The next thing to actually watch isn't this year's 5 machines. It's whether CXMT, SMIC, and Hua Hong can run them reliably at scale. Because that's the moment this stops being a headline and starts being an industry.
Huawei just did something that chip experts said should not be possible right now. For 8 straight months, one of its most important laptops was running on secret silicon that nobody outside the company could confirm. No press release, no spec sheet, no announcement. Then one small software update ripped the secret wide open, and it turns out Huawei was hiding something big. The laptop is the MateBook Pro, and it launched all the way back in May 2025. From day one, buyers and reviewers noticed something strange. Huawei never listed the processor. Every other laptop maker on Earth brags about its chip on page 1 of the marketing. Huawei said nothing. That silence lasted 8 months, until the Harmony OS 6 update rolled out and quietly revealed the chip's name inside the system settings for the very first time. The chip is called the Kirin X90, and it is not a small deal. This is the same processor already confirmed to be running inside the MateBook Fold, which means Huawei built one chip to power its entire premium laptop lineup instead of designing something different for each device. That is a real strategy, not a one-off experiment. Here are the actual numbers. The Kirin X90 uses a 4+4+2 core layout, which adds up to 10 cores and 20 threads. 8 of those cores run at 2.31 GHz, 2 more run at 2.05 GHz, and the whole chip can burst up to a maximum of 4.2 GHz. That is a real hybrid design, mixing performance and efficiency cores the same way major chip makers do it, just built entirely by Huawei's own engineers. But the cores are not even the most interesting part. Huawei did not license a graphics chip from anyone else. It built its own, called the Malion 916 GPU, completely in-house. It also built its own NPU, the part of the chip that handles AI tasks like photo processing, voice recognition, and machine learning. That means Huawei now controls every major piece of this chip from the ground up, with zero dependence on outside graphics or AI hardware. Keep that number in your head, 0, because that is the whole reason this story matters. Now here is the part that should genuinely shock you. Back in 2019, Huawei was placed on the United States Entity List. That single move cut Huawei off from American technology completely. It could no longer buy chip design tools from companies like ARM without special permission, and it lost its manufacturing relationship with TSMC, the company that was actually building Huawei's most advanced chips at the time. On top of that, the Dutch company ASML, the only company on the planet capable of building the machines that make the smallest, most advanced chips using extreme ultraviolet light, was pressured to stop selling that equipment to China entirely. At that point, almost every analyst in the industry agreed on one thing. Without ASML's machines, Huawei and its manufacturing partner SMIC would get stuck making older, weaker chips forever, while the rest of the world kept racing ahead. The gap was supposed to widen every single year until it became impossible to close. Without access to the newest extreme ultraviolet machines, Chinese foundries have leaned on older deep ultraviolet equipment, using a technique where the same layer of a chip gets exposed multiple times to squeeze out more detail than the machine was originally built for. It is slower, it is more expensive, and it produces more failed chips along the way. But it works, and the Kirin X90 is proof that it works well enough to power a real shipping laptop that people are using right now. The Harmony OS 6 update that exposed the chip did not stop at just naming it either. It carried the February 2026 security patch and fixed an issue where the Celia AI assistant showed the wrong file size when exporting files. Small fixes on their own, but they show something important. This chip has been running long enough and stable enough for Huawei to keep pushing real software updates on top of it for months without needing to hide anything about the hardware underneath. A chip that was struggling would not get quiet, routine updates like this. It would get pulled. Remember those 20 threads from earlier? That number matters more than it sounds. 20 threads means this chip can genuinely run multiple heavy programs at the same time without slowing down. Real multitasking, not the marketing kind. And that 4.2 GHz peak speed gives it a real burst of power for single tasks that need it fast, like compiling code or crunching a big calculation in one go. Put those two numbers together and you get a chip built for actual laptop work. Not just a chip built to win an argument on a spec sheet. This is exactly why Huawei stayed quiet for 8 months. Announcing a brand new domestically built chip while it is still being tested in the real world is risky. If something went wrong, if performance dropped, if the chip overheated under real use, that failure would have been front-page news everywhere. Instead, Huawei let the MateBook Pro sit on shelves quietly, let real customers use it every single day, and only confirmed the chip once it had already proven itself. That is not a marketing mistake. That is a company protecting its own reputation until the product earned the right to be named. There is a bigger pattern hiding underneath all of this. The whole point of the 2019 sanctions was to slow Huawei down and stop Chinese chip progress before it caught up to the West. But look at what actually happened instead. Huawei was forced to build its own operating system from scratch, which became Harmony OS. Nobody is claiming that. It was Huawei hiding a win until it was ready to prove it. The bigger question now is simple. Huawei did not build a 1nm chip. That headline is wrong, and the real story is bigger than that fake claim. In May 2026, Huawei's chip chief He Tingbo unveiled a new design called Logic Folding at a conference in Shanghai. It skips 1nm lithography completely. It stacks transistors instead of shrinking them. That one decision might threaten TSMC more than any single chip ever could. To understand why this matters, go back to 2019. The United States hit Huawei with sanctions. Washington pressured the Netherlands to block a Dutch company called ASML from selling its most advanced machines to China. ASML is the only company on Earth that builds UV lithography machines. UV stands for extreme ultraviolet. These machines fire light at a wavelength of 13.5 nanometers to carve tiny circuits onto silicon. Without one, making chips smaller than 7 nanometers becomes nearly impossible. Each machine costs between $150 million and $380 million. Washington's plan was simple. Cut off the machine, and China's chip industry freezes in place. For a while, it looked like the plan worked. Then in September 2023, Huawei released the Mate 60 Pro phone. Engineers cracked it open and found a 7nm chip called the Kirin 9000S inside. It was made by SMIC, China's largest chip maker, without a single ASML UV machine. That crack kept growing. Reports from 2025 placed Huawei engineers at a facility in Dongguan, testing pieces of a homemade UV machine. The light source came from research at the Harbin Institute of Technology, using a method called laser-induced discharge plasma, or LDIP. Instead of blasting a laser at flying tin droplets the way ASML does. The LDP method vaporizes tin between two electrodes and zaps it with electricity. The result is the same 13.5 nanometer light that ASML machines produce, just made a completely different way. Trial production was set to start, with full manufacturing targeted for 2026. But here is the part almost nobody explains clearly.